The first confirmed Zika-related death in the continental U.S., and it happened right here in Salt Lake County.
Yeah, tonight we are learning more about the case of a resident who died in the last part of June.
The symptoms are subtle. Doctors say in most cases the fever and rash go unnoticed. This week, Salt Lake County Health Department learned a resident contracted the Zika infection.
This is the first confirmed Zika-related death in the continental United States. The deceased individual was elderly and had an underlying medical condition.
On Friday, the health department shed light on the case. They say the resident died at the end of June.
While this individual did test positive for Zika virus, the exact cause of death has not been determined, and it may not be possible to determine how the Zika infection contributed to the death.
Because of privacy laws, the health department won't be releasing who the person is or where they traveled.
Clearly, there's some risks which we're just beginning to understand to people with underlying health issues and immunocompromising conditions. How big that risk is, we don't know. CDC doesn't know yet.
We'll begin with the latest on the deployment of a powerful U.S. missile defense system to South Korea. North Korea has shown its first official response since Seoul and Washington announced their plan to deploy THAAD, and it says the decision will prompt its military response.
North Korea says it'll take physical action against South Korea and the U.S., a warning against the allies' decision to deploy the U.S. Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System in South Korea. According to the state-run Korean Central News Agency Monday, the North's military is ready to strike against Seoul and Washington the moment the two confirm the location of the THAAD system, threatening it'll turn them into a, quote, sea of fire.
And 3 Ukrainian soldiers have died and a further 16 others have been wounded in violent clashes with pro-Russia forces in Ukraine's troubled eastern region. A Ukrainian military spokesman says the fighting occurred 50 kilometers northeast of the city of Donetsk. Pro-Russians accused the Ukrainian military of shelling Donetsk and injuring 4 civilians. Clashes raged despite several ceasefire agreements aimed at halting the 26-month conflict. Kiev accuses Moscow of having a major role in the crisis in eastern Ukraine, a charge that Kremlin denies.
Russia's foreign ministry has criticized NATO's weekend summit in Warsaw, saying the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is focusing on a non-existent threat from the east. Moscow says the meeting shows that NATO has failed to catch up with the times. The Kremlin has repeatedly spoken out against NATO's decision to deploy 4 military battalions to eastern Poland and the Baltic states. Russian delegates are expected to question the alliance about its plans for the region during a NATO-Russia Council meeting that'll be held during July.
الله أكبر وقعت الله أكبر وقعت الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد.
On one level, the report about Islamic State's foothold in Iraq and Syria from the global research firm IHS is good. It says the militant's self-styled caliphate has lost a quarter of its territory in 18 months of fighting, amounting to the size of Ireland. This as a disparate collage of hostile forces make gains on IS, from the army in Iraq and its allied forces to a U.S.-led coalition of airstrikes to a broad rebel alliance in Syria. But the news in Sunday's report is also grim. It says militants will likely further step up attacks on civilians in the coming months. As the caliphate shrinks, it says, IS is reprioritizing its insurgency, meaning nations can expect an increase in mass casualty attacks and sabotage of economic infrastructure. Like the one in Baghdad that killed some 300 people last week. The warning is not just across Iraq and Syria, but further afield, including Europe.
A U.S. Navy ship is on a mission to deter refugees and migrants from trying to make the dangerous crossing into Europe. Seth Doan takes us on board.
We met the USNS Grapple in the Aegean Sea.
How you doing? Hey, I'm Seth.
On board, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Jeremiah Lyons told us they're looking for migrants.
Our job isn't to intercept them or take them on board. Our primary mission is surveillance.
They also cross from here down here.
The captain of this civilian-operated support ship, Curtis Smith, told us they suspect migrant smugglers are watching the Grapple and avoid making the crossing when they're on patrol.
By us being here, they can see the larger ship and they'll know that, okay, somebody's out there looking for us. So we shouldn't cross or we shouldn't go. It's kind of like a traffic cop. If you see a traffic cop and you're speeding, you're going to slow down.
This is the Turkish coastline, and this is Greece. At this point, just about 4 miles separate migrants and refugees from making it to Europe. Still, it can be a dangerous crossing. Video shot inside a migrant raft reveals the cramped conditions. This boat full of refugees was in sight of land near the Greek island of Rhodes when it hit submerged rocks with tragic results.
Since we've been here, there's been a sharp decrease in migrant activity.
While some European countries have started building walls to keep migrants out, these ships armed with infrared and night vision technology are creating a barrier at sea.
Osama bin Laden's son is reportedly planning revenge on the U.S. after his father's death. In a 21-minute-long speech titled "We Are All Osama," posted to a militant website, Hamza bin Laden pledged to continue the militants' fight against the U.S. In a translation of the speech posted by the Daily Pakistan, Hamza bin Laden said, "We will continue striking you and targeting you in your country and abroad in response to your oppression of the people of Palestine, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, and the rest of the Muslim lands that did not survive your oppression." Bin Laden has recently stepped up his role in al-Qaeda, posting an audio message in May urging Syrian jihadists to take action to liberate Palestine. It's left many wondering if he's the future leader of the terrorist group.
On to our next story. Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is expected to arrive in Tel Aviv later today. Shoukry is scheduled to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. Peace talks with Palestinians will be among the main topics of conversation. This is the first visit by an Egyptian foreign minister to Israel in 9 years. Relations between Cairo and Tel Aviv have been growing since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took office in Egypt in 2014. Israel reopened its embassy in Cairo in September 2015, and Egypt sent an ambassador to Tel Aviv in January. This year, Israel is forced to close its embassy in Cairo back in 2011 after thousands of protesters stormed the compound.
Today I call again on the Palestinians to follow the courageous examples of Egypt and Jordan and join us for direct negotiations. This is the only way we can address all the outstanding problems between us and turn the vision of peace based on 2 states for 2 peoples into a reality.
It is no longer acceptable to claim that the status quo is the most that we can achieve of the hopes and aspirations of the Palestinian and Israeli peoples. The vision of the 2-state solution is not far-fetched. A multitude of ideas and initiatives have been proposed to make it a practical reality. I would like to assure that Egypt's commitment to supporting a just, comprehensive, and sustainable resolution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and to supporting peace and security in the Middle East is a steadfast and unwavering commitment, and that the Egyptian leadership is serious in its determination to provide all possible forms of support in order to achieve this noble goal.
So we are calling on all the population.
As South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and First Vice President Riek Machar were briefing reporters on their talks to end fighting, fresh clashes broke out in the capital, sending everyone scrambling for cover. Officials said on Saturday at least 115 soldiers are dead in fighting between rival factions that broke out in the capital, Juba. It's the latest flare-up in a 2-year-old civil war which started in December 2013 after Kiir sacked Machar as vice president. A peace agreement last August ended the war, but the two sides have yet to integrate their forces. This week's gunfights were the first major outbreak of violence in Juba since Machar returned to the capital in April when he was reappointed as vice president. Experts warn the nation risks sliding back into conflict unless the two sides move swiftly to implement the peace plan.
Sunday means church for many in this part of America. On this Sunday, services at Cornerstone Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas, took on special meaning.
Evil is evil, and good is good. And so many things now are happening are just evil.
3 days after a black sniper killed 5 white police officers and wounded 7 others in nearby Dallas, the community is still reeling.
It was a plot straight from the pit of hell. It was demonic, and it needs to be denounced in the strongest terms. That was nothing but racism. I wake up every morning.
It's time, Arlington's police chief said, for his department and the people it serves and for the country to come together to look for common ground.
We collectively as a society have to stand up and say no more violence. We have to work together to understand everybody's perspective and their concerns.
Of course, what happened this past Thursday in Dallas did not happen in a vacuum. Tensions between some African Americans and some police officers are a continuing issue in the U.S. There's real anger out there. Go back. That anger surfaced again overnight in Louisiana and Minnesota, the scenes of 2 fatal police shootings of black men last week. More than 200 protesters were arrested. Nearly 24 officers were hurt at one of the protests.
Except ye repent.
Cornerstone's pastor Dwight McKissick says citizens must remain composed and under control if they're pulled over by police.
If you don't learn, young people, to honor your mama and daddy, you'll take that same attitude to the streets. Your mama might put up with it, but the police is not going to put up with your attitude.
He said African Americans may be treated differently at times by cops, but he and other parishioners said those in the black community must tread cautiously in their dealings with police.
We need to let the officers know if we're just reaching for our wallet, we need to let them know that we are reaching for it. We don't want any kind of misunderstanding to take place.
These are difficult days when it comes to police-community relations.
It doesn't seem that we even see people anymore as just people. We're seeing them as a race, a color, a religion.
We must improve policing, Chief Johnson said, and respect the work officers do, bringing calm out of chaos. That's what this Sunday service was all about. And
over 3,000 naked people were painted blue in the UK on Saturday for art because an American artist asked them to.
B1 to your right, B2, B4, and B3.
Spencer Tunick's Sea of Hall was commissioned by an art gallery to celebrate the city's maritime heritage.
We covered the people with the sort of the art of the gallery. It also references the rising of the oceans and climate change.
Thousands of Venezuelans crossed the border with Colombia on July the 10th to buy life necessities.
Tenemos que venir aquí en esta jornada que hubo porque no se encuentra ya nada, y si encuentran son el triple de caro. Y entonces así no podemos y no estamos sin nada que comer en la casa.
The Simon Bolivar Bridge between the Venezuelan town of San Antonio del Táchira and the Colombian town of Cúcuta was temporarily opened after almost a year-long closure by Venezuela to contain smuggling and paramilitary activities. The Colombian authorities estimated that some 35,000 people came from Venezuela on the day to buy staple foods, personal care products, and medicines. The weekend transit was in preparation for the full opening of the bridge in the near future, according to local authorities.
One sun is boring. Astronomers using Europe's Very Large Telescope just discovered a planet in a system with 3. The planet, which is about 4 times as massive as Jupiter, orbits around the system's central star, between it and the other pair of stars farther out. From the surface, an observer could see triple sunrises and sunsets, kind of like Tatooine, but better. And for about a quarter of its orbit, the planet is in constant daylight. As the central sun sets, the other 2 rise. It's surprising the planet is there at all. The researchers say the gravity of 3 different stars pulling in odd directions would usually fling any objects between them out of the system.